Hello, everybody. Welcome to Wisdom from North. This is Janneke, and my guest on the show today is Freeman Michaels. And our topic is weight release versus losing weight. Because Michael is a speaker, he's a coach and an author of the book Weight Release, A Journey of Liberation. That was almost correct, wasn't it?
A liberating journey, but that's
Liberating
good.
journey.
I like the way you said it, a journey of liberation. I love
I just
it.
made it up in my mind. But also, Michael is the co-host of the amazing radio talk show Cutting Edge Consciousness, together with Barnet Bain, who I have already interviewed in 2013. So welcome, Freeman. How are you doing?
Good, Janneke. Thanks for having me.
You know, you've been on my list for like 2 years, and I don't know why it took so long. And I was like, oh, okay, now I just got to write him. And, I've been watching your program on YouTube, actually, even though it's a radio talk show, for so many years. And I love how personal you make it and how you really delve into these topics. And also that you are guys, because in Norway, we don't have many men, actually, who are doing transformal and transformative media. So,
Yet. You don't have any yet. That many yet.
True.
It's coming. I don't think it's far off. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a big evolution from my perspective, and it isn't that men aren't doing their work. I think they are. I think women are leading in so many ways. What's interesting is, I don't know if the topic is weight release, but I don't know. This is where we're at, right? So a lot of the work that I'm currently doing is around women in leadership, which seems odd because I'm a guy. But what happened is I have a female training partner, a woman named Susan Leahy, who you'd love. She's delightful. And the miracles and the synchronicity and how I ended up doing what I'm doing today, there's no possible way. I need like a graph to say, well, this happened and that happened. It's not linear, right? So I landed in this space and I'm in a conversation about a new form of leadership, which is really coming from your heart. It's about connecting. It's about building community. It's about win-win. And that's the big paradigm shift from my perspective. And so the idea that women are leading this, that it's built on feminine principles and feminine, the energy of feminine, not necessarily women per se, men and women, because we all have access to the energies, right, of the masculine and the feminine, but that women are really leading this, to me at this moment makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I've been speaking a lot about this lately too, and I'm actually having my first live show now in Oslo, where we're going to speak about what's holding many women back, because I feel like we have so much to give, but yet we're a little bit tentative, hesitant, we're a little bit afraid, even though I think it's time for us to really shine now and come forward.
So you don't strike me as afraid or timid.
I'm afraid of many things, but not this, because I've been an actress, so I guess this, comes naturally.
Yeah, so this is it. I think that there are things that all of us get scared about, but the imperative, which is to grow and evolve, it's an internal imperative, is up for a lot of people. And the beauty is we have things like YouTube, so we have a medium, and I see lots of women stepping into the space and being the voice of a new way of thinking, a new possibility for everyone. It's a very generous offer. That's one of the things about the women in leadership, is that the women, in the way that they're leading, as a man, feels very generous to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It feels like I really get included. Now, I'm not talking about an old model of feminism, though that was appropriate at the time and important. The new sort of, I don't even know what we'd call it, but reharmonizing, because I really think the chauvinism and the imbalanced sort of masculine took us down a path that if we keep going, it is clearly self-destruction, right? If we stay in the fight, in the me versus we, and the ego, and the trying to dominate and control and so forth, that has gotten us to where we are, but it won't get us to where we want to go. So I think, women, the offer includes me in a way that feels really good to me.
Oh, wonderful. Well, guys, you just have to check out Cutting Edge Consciousness. You just have to check it out. It's awesome. But now I want to speak about weight release. And this is
No problem.
something I haven't covered at all. And I was so excited about, seeing that you were doing that too, because I didn't know when I started doing research on you. And a lot of, me included, a lot of women have had weight issues. And you have this totally different way of meeting this issue. So can you walk us through it? Like 6 years ago, you were much heavier than you were today.
Yeah. Well, I have a pretty crazy swing. I was a 175-pound soap opera star in the middle 90s. And in the mid to late 2000s, I ballooned to about 280 pounds. So that's over a 100-pound swing. I don't know what that is in kilos, but it's a lot of weight. And I don't know what I weigh today. And frankly, I don't weigh myself. I don't own a scale. The gauge is internal, and it's how I feel in my own skin. And it's about, it's always a rebalancing, right? So the relationship I had with food prior to a sort of awakening that I went through was that I was in a struggle with it, right? I had made food lots of things that it's not. So from a kind of coping standpoint, I would use food when I was stressed or sad. I could even tell you what kinds of food. If I was stressed, I liked salty and crunchy. If I was feeling very emotional, I wanted sweet and creamy ice cream, for example. And so I started to gauge when I was going for certain foods, what was that reflecting in terms of emotions? And I wanted to create healthier ways to meet my needs, right? So I created these, what I call self-soothing practices, meditation, bathing, taking walks, really being with what's coming up for me versus sort of medicating or stuffing it down with food. So that's sort of the premise. And the release has to do with more of releasing the burden of beliefs and ideas and agreements I had with other people about who I was, and what was possible in my life. So the shedding of that kind of stuff was the release. So there's a couple paths here. One is how I learned to care for myself. There's a self-care element. And the other had to do with ideas I had about myself. Because carrying extra weight is a kind of protection, right? We carry extra weight sometimes to fend off attention, I wasn't physically abused, but for people who are physically abused, often that's padding. It's a kind of way that they've padded themselves. So there's a lot going on with weight that isn't just how many calories I take in and what I ought to look like. In fact, the whole idea of what I ought to look like is part of the burden that we need to release.
Okay. But do you have to really find out why you're eating? Like get to the core of what's the deep, belief you have about yourself? Because that might be deep down in the subconscious.
It is. It is. Well, and there's layers. So look, the first thing we want to do is we want to begin to choose. Consciousness is all about choice, right? So we want to choose how we want to relate to our body, how we want to relate to food, and how we want to relate to exercise, how we want to. That doesn't mean that's how we do, right? So what happens is the choice, we're going to call this the high road, is I want to love my body. I want to nurture it. How I want to feel in my body is I want vibrancy, energy, and so forth. Exercise, I want it to be fun. In the past, I would pick exercises that were kind of self-punishing, right? Things I would end up quitting because I didn't like them. So that was all part of my psychology based on this foundational belief that something was wrong with me, that I wasn't good enough. And so I had equated my weight with me being good or acceptable or lovable. And when I didn't feel lovable, I would do one of two behaviors. At one point, I would starve myself because that was the extreme of being underweight, or I would stuff myself. But neither of them was loving myself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so the work was, because here's where the challenge is. What you said about sort of getting deep and figuring out what's the core thread, what's the core maybe wound or the piece I need to uncover and kind of heal in order to release the weight. While there's a part of that that's really valuable, that orientation is fundamentally flawed because here's what happens with that. The premise is I can't be happy and fulfilled and, so forth and so on until I fix something. And almost all people who are in that I've got to fix something are actually unconsciously feeding the story that something's wrong with me. You got that?
Yeah.
So here's what we want to do. Yes, we want to look at what's going on underneath the kind of waterline, what's below the consciousness, what's really running the show. Sure, we want to look at that, but we want to look at it in a context, okay? And the context is, how do I want to relate to my body? How do I want to relate to food? How do I want to relate to exercise? And once we begin to establish that, then in that context, I'm willing to look at the challenges I face, but I don't want to identify with them.
Oh, okay. But what about, the inner child? I assume inner child work, because I kind of link that to the inner child. Something happened to me when I was 10 and she felt that I am not worthy. And then a lot of people are saying that you need to connect with that 10-year-old and make her feel safe and everything.
Yes. So there's, again, two things going on. One, you're not 10 anymore. You're an adult woman. And so we're not dismissing the fact that there's a part of you that still feels like a 10-year-old. And that at the point at 10 when something happened, you developed a belief or a story, right? And that story is kind of still running the show. And your worldview, in psychology we use the term schema, your filtering process is still recreating that story or affirming that story in your moment-to-moment experience, right? So all of that is true. And we don't want to diminish that. But again, we want to bring it back to you, the adult empowered woman. Yannicka, what do you choose for your life? What do you want? And once you get that, then the healing is in that context. Because what happens when we over-identify with the healing is we over-identify with the wound. The wound is just part of the experience. The stories are just part of the experience. And they come up in moments. If we don't make too big of a deal of them, because it is a big deal. I don't want to diminish the fact that we have these core sort of wounds and these stories that we have to kind of work through, and we do, but we want to be really good at putting them down. Like just recognizing like, oh, that's that thought. Oh, that's that story. But not going into a big drama around it. Just going, I get it. Part of me, for example, copes with food. Part of me still overeats. Like that's just part of what I'm working through on a regular basis. So my practice is some mindful eating practices, the way I'm doing the choosing. I always ask myself, who's doing the choosing right now? Is it the part of me that has this way I want to relate to my body, to food and so forth, or is the part of me that's acting out of the reaction, out of the emotionality and so forth? So who's doing the choosing? What part of me is doing the choosing? How am I relating to the food? Am I breathing between bites? Am I hydrating? Am I having enough water? I drink a ton of water. That's how I take care of myself during the day. And so these are the kinds of adjustments we want to make, but in the context of what we want to create. Then the healing becomes simply a byproduct of the aspiration of who we're committed to being. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I connect this to, the new way of teaching in the self-development field, that before we were much more focused on the past, healing the past, but now we're like envisioning the future.
That's it. Okay. Psychology, which I have a master's in, whatever, it's fine, is helpful in understanding how you got to where you are now. But it does little or nothing to take you to where you want to go. In fact, at some point, if you keep rehashing your psychology, it's like you're taking your past and you're throwing it into the future, because that's all you can recreate from that perspective. Right?
Yeah.
What we need to do is begin to imagine a possibility that we're committed to and then start organizing our life so that's what we're creating. Do we find ourselves tripping on the old patterns? Of course we do. But we hold those in the context of what we're committed to creating.
So would it help, for instance, to have a vision of how you would look like?
Exactly. Yeah. Visions are everything. In the book, I definitely do visions about how I want to relate to my body and what's my vision, but it's not a number, by the way. We have to be very careful, because the story that there's something wrong with us is so perpetuated in the culture, Western culture. The media has created a body type that isn't healthy. especially for women. I mean, look, if you look at models on the runway, they're ill. I mean, most of them have, really anorexia or some kind of illness because less than 3% of the population is naturally that thin. The ideal, right? And with men, you have this athletic physique that, look, I was a soap star. I worked like mad to get those abs of steel or whatever the heck you call them. It wasn't going to happen. My body type isn't that. My job was to love my body for what it is. I know that on some level I couldn't live up to that standard. At the time, I let that torture me. Later on, I looked at it and went, wow, what a painful way of reflecting back, not just to me, but to all 99% of the male population that they're not good enough.
Yeah.
To women, 97% of the population's got a reflection back in the mirror that says you're not good enough. Your boobs aren't big enough. Your hips aren't wide enough or thin enough or, who cares? Right? So we have this perpetual story that we're not good enough, we're not enough. So it's not, there's a real diligence in being the conscious creator of what we want because we have to keep sort of, working through the chatter, our own chatter in our own minds, but also the collective chatter of the cultural agreement.
Yes, and many of the pictures are manipulated, and there's a campaign now by a wonderful woman that I've interviewed, and she made this video where she was first, standing in a bikini just like herself, and then they manipulated her, and she looked like a 16-year-old, and she was like 45 or something. And now this campaign is going, or wants to have a mark on the picture, so it says that this picture is manipulated, so that
I like it.
Kids will know, all young,
I like it. I like that. Another thing you brought up, which is really important, is we have this infatuation with youth, right? And it's really work to create beauty and aging, Again, especially for women. Guys, it's kind of okay if your hair gets gray or whatever. Because, again, it's such a setup. And we're the choosers, So it's not the bigger we, it's the me. What do I choose? Because if there's enough me's that are making choices about what we want to create, the collective consciousness raises, right? Because that's what we're talking about from the very get-go, right? We've got these collective beliefs and agreements that bind us to a very small story of possibility in our lives.
And it's not easy, It's I feel like I constantly have to remind myself to think for myself.
Constantly.
Yeah. Every day I can fall down back to, society says that I should or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you give me an example of what I could do when I'm I'm done with dinner and I'm just sitting there and I want more? I just want more.
What part of you wants more?
I have no idea. Many parts of me. I like food. It's so nice to eat.
So what do you equate food with in that moment? Like I can even see your body and how you are expressing it. What's going on for you that the food represents?
Oh, it's safety.
Yeah. Comfort, safety.
Comfort.
Yeah. So here's what I offer. It's a conscious choice to make something a representation of that. It can still be food. For example, you may want to do like a really nice warm tea, even something that's sweet. Put a little honey in it. Make yourself a treat, as it were, but make it consciously. And then you're consciously enjoying it as a direct expression of comfort, of warmth, of sharing, but you're not doing it in a way that's unconscious.
Right.
I have a crazy one. When I would come home as a young boy, my parents would, this early in their relationship, later on in their lives, they stopped doing this, but they came out of the 50s. So it was very common to have a cocktail, at least in the United States, when you got home, right? And so gin and tonics, the clanking, my grandparents did this forever. And I lived with them quite a bit during the summers. And they would have a cocktail. And so the whole idea of they would call it taking the edge off, right? Mm-hmm. Taking the edge of the day off. And they would have a drink or two or whatever it was. And so I had this association of taking the edge off with a glass of wine or with a cocktail. And I don't want to drink that much. I can drink that much for sure because booze, along with food, are ways that I self-soothe and numb and cope and so forth. So what we do is we do mocktails, which is just seltzer water, spritzer water, the bubbly water, mineral water with lime. But we do a ritual, my wife and I. And can I make you a mocktail? Yeah, make me a mocktail. It's like,
Yeah,
we do a whole thing about making it. We
yeah.
make it, and then we meet in the kitchen, and it's really sweet. And it's all the same components without without the alcohol, without the calories. I mean, it isn't really calories. Again, yes, it's calories, but it's the unconscious pattern of numbing myself. I don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And what you said earlier, too, I want to comment on the idea of this old road, new road. This is the unconscious patterning. This is the path we're committed to creating. Do we fall off this path? Constantly. That's not an issue. It's how quickly do we get back on? How quickly do we wake up and get conscious? And then out of conscious, make a choice. It's moment to moment, day to day. A day is filled with conscious choices, and it's also filled with unconscious patterning. That's normal. We do that. But the difference is I have the ability to create what I want in my life. Yeah? And the patterning just come along. The unconscious patterning comes along too. It's part of the experience of being me.
It seems like we have been making this harder than it actually is.
Totally.
Yeah. And you
It's
think
not
so?
it's not complicated. It's actually incredibly easy. Well, let me say it this way. It is simple, but it isn't necessarily easy. So it is simple. For example, when we talk about healing, healing is the process of applying love to whatever part inside hurts. That's all we're doing. Compassion, understanding, surrender, forgiveness, all those are expressions of love, right? It's so easy. When we're feeling wounded or we're feeling hurt, can we just apply love, compassion, understanding, surrender, whatever it is? Can we just apply that? So simple, but not easy.
And knowing that we're powerful enough so it can shift, that we are powerful, that we have the power.
And it's just a statement that I am powerful enough to make choices in my life about what I want. Go back to the vision, because the vision is really important. So I talk about, one of my favorite is my relationship vision, for example, with my wife. It's a good example. Number one, we play and have fun together. Number two, we relate openly and honestly without fear of saying the wrong thing. And it goes down, and we list out, what is it we're committed to creating? What's the quality of our connection? And how do we want to deal with challenges? It's not an issue for us. We've been together 15 years, but early on in our relationship, my wife was very scared that I was going to have an affair or whatever. That was part of her backstory from her family of origin. And so what we agreed to was, we hold each other. Here's what it says. We hold each other in our consciousness when relating to the opposite sex. So if there's a woman, you, for example, or whomever, that I'm having a conversation with, at the moment that it starts to feel like, ooh, this is a little too much, it's inappropriate, I have an observer for that. And the way I do this is very simple. I always think, would my wife be okay with this conversation? If not, I got to clean it up, because it's a betrayal of my commitment to her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, how beautiful. I love how personal you are. And I saw this program with you and your wife and Barnett's wife and you together. And I think you were talking about sex.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You can say it.
That was really brave. But I would really love to hear your story, actually, because I'm curious how you got from being a soap star, being an actor, and starting, this channel, this radio channel.
Well, there's two answers. One is I don't know.
Okay.
Because I mean, Barnett and I call it the sacred I don't know. There's we have these top of the mountain moments, and often it's interesting because for me, hiking in the woods and I get to the top of the mountain and I really can kind of see everything clearly, right? But it's more of a metaphor than literally, where we can kind of see like how perfect all of the, little catastrophes and the little wins in our life, how they all kind of fit together. Because when you're in the middle of it, one thing feels like a win and another thing feels like, oh, it's a catastrophe. It should have gone a different way. And then you get above it all and you go, oh my God, my life is so perfectly set up. It's all aligned. Because again, the whole idea that I'm making a living training women in leadership, if you told me that, 5 years ago, I would look to you like, not possible. I just couldn't have put the two and two together. Like it wouldn't have made sense, right?
But still, you were a soap star. What happened? Something happened, right? Have you always been spiritual, or where did this drive come from that you wanted to do something else not act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, there's sort of two sides of it. One side is I acted for two reasons. One reason was I wanted attention. The
Okay.
other reason is I felt like I was kind of good at it. I guess there's more reasons. The third is, I guess, I started feeling like I was good looking. I had the ugly duckling syndrome where I didn't feel good about myself. And then I had this kind of blossoming around 15, and I started getting attention for my looks. And other things in my life coincided with that, where I had this kind of blossoming moment. I found acting. I found I was good at it. And it took me on this ride. But I was very much in the mindset that I wanted to be famous, that I wanted attention, that I wanted to be good at it. I mean, I wanted to be good at something, right? So, I mean, some part of it was that. But then something happened for me, which was very interesting. So, my whole life, I was told that I was too sensitive and that I talked too
Oh.
much.
Oh.
And I think, for me, I am very sensitive. My son, who's 12 now, he's very sensitive. And I see the reflection of me in him. Like I see him kind of in the world, getting overwhelmed, and he cries, and he's 12 and he shouldn't be crying anymore. And he's this really sensitive boy, and he's very sweet. And he reminds me of me as a kid. So I was told that my whole life. What in my family of origin, they were very cerebral. My brother's a professor. My father teaches at a university. And my mother, whatever. My grandfather was very intellectual and kind of cut off, right, from the neck down. And I was too much. Literally, they would say, Freeman, you're too much. Well, they called me Michael back then. But too much. I was too much. So I learned to cut off. When I found acting, I found this outlet where I could be really emotional and really big. So I've often said this, that I felt more real when I was acting than I did in my real life. So acting became this outlet where I got to be more authentic, more real, more of who I really am. And then the process in my life was to kind of integrate them. So there was only one of me. I wasn't split off. I didn't need to be playing a character to have a sort of peak experience. I could actually have it in my identity of who I actually am. And that's been a lifelong thing, because even today, I feel like sometimes I go into a kind of mode, a personality or persona in the world, and I have to check in and slow down and get grounded and go, what's going on for me? And I have to work to be authentic. It's not easy to be authentic. I mean, most of our lives, we are hiding that stuff. We don't want to tell the truth, right? So I'm very diligent and very committed to being radically honest with myself first, but then out in the world.
Amazing. But are you still acting at all, or did you just? I just
I don't know.
Hear the jump.
If the phone rings and someone says, "Hey, you want to?"
Okay.
I had this crazy experience. Okay, so we did a show because Clark. What's Clark's last name? I don't remember his last name. Peterson, I think. Clark. Clark and I became kind of friends. Clark produced the movie that Selma Hayek made about the prophet. With Liam Neeson. Anyhow, Clark came on. He actually came in studio, and he and I have connected and kind of become buddies. And we were talking about something totally different. He said, we should do a project together. And so I was like, wow, that would be so weird. Like right now at this moment, I don't really have time. But I mean, I will. We'll get back together because the project is sitting there. It's not going anywhere, and I think we should do it. But it was so funny, and I was like, wouldn't that be weird if I started doing that again? So I really don't know, I think this is a really important point that I want to make. We train this a lot. We always say that the greatest possibility for your life is beyond your present perception. I'm going to say it again because it's really important. The greatest possibility, and this is true for you, Yannicka, for your life is beyond what you can presently see from where you're presently standing. Right? It's on the other side of the world you see. And once we know that, then all we do is head in the direction of, right? We've been taught to goal set. We should set a goal. And goal setting is fine in a particular way because we have to aim towards something. I mean, you can't just sit around and think about it. You have to actually take action and do something. But here's the thing about goal setting. A goal is always an expression of limitation because it's what you can see from where you're presently standing. It's
That
always
makes sense.
Yeah, it's always an example. A goal is always an example, which means it's always someone else's life. The unique version that's going to be yours, we don't know yet because it's not what someone else has done, right? So what we want to do when we have an inspiration, we say, I want to go be an actor. I want to go create this thing. What are the qualities of experience that we associate with that? And if we can find expression for the qualities of experience in that, yes, but in all kinds of other ways in our lives, our way of being is in alignment with what we want, and we head in the direction of something, and life takes rights and lefts, and next thing you know, we're doing women in leadership training. Who knew?
Yeah.
But it's totally in alignment with what I'm up to in my life. It's totally connected to what matters to me, what I'm committed to. I just never knew it would look like that. It's always a miracle. That's the thing about the greatest expression of us, is it's always like a happy accident. You can't plan genius. Genius is just a gift. It happens in a moment, and bang, you're like, wow, this is genius. But you can't plan for that, right?
No, that makes sense. I love
Yeah.
that about the goal because, I've been educated as a school teacher as well, but I'm not going to become a teacher. It was something I did. I guess I just needed to do that. And then we have all these goals in the book. And I never resonated with that. And that makes sense what you're saying, that then you're actually limiting the thing the result of it. And it could have been so much more.
We ask children, who do they want to be when they grow up? I mean, what a silly thing to ask a child. I don't know, and even then, I think about my family of origin. What I did was completely out of the box. Like, no one understood what I was doing. You're what? You're going to be an actor? Like, that's weird. Everyone tried to talk me out of it because it didn't fit. There's 5 things in my family that you could do, right? Teacher. I mean, there's a list. There's a short menu of what's possible in terms of careers. Because that's what they know. That's their comfort zone. And of course they're going to impose that on me because they want me to be safe and they want to protect me and they want me to be happy. But they don't know that what they're doing is imposing limitation. And the greatest expression of me is none of those things. Or it's one of those things, but in my own unique and powerful way. Right?
Yeah.
So even for you, whatever drew you to teaching is still in your life. And it's still going to be part of the greatest expression of you. Do you know what drew you to teaching? What was it about teaching that inspired you or that drew you?
I think, it has many answers, this question, but I had been a child actress ever since I was 7 years old. I've been only acting, only singing, and part of me was like, I want this academic education. I want to prove to myself that I'm smart enough. Because on some level I wasn't sure, if I would be able to study like all my other friends, or if I could just be on stage and sing and dance, and so I had to prove this, and then I proved that, and I got brilliant grades, and now I'm like, I've done that, so I don't need to become a teacher.
But maybe you are a teacher. I mean, let's just play with this for a minute. Because whatever drew you to it, whether it was helping people, whether it was something around children, or maybe it's adults, or something that drew you to it, probably is still a thread of what's going to be fulfilling for you. We don't have to make it a teaching in the conventional way. This is, by the way, how we get to vision. So what we want to do is take all the choices you've made in your life, all the things you thought you wanted, or moments in your life that were kind of peak experiences, and we want to tease out, just pull out what the quality of experience was, what fired you up. And once we get that, that's the raw material from which to build a truly unique and fulfilling life. The expression of it, I don't necessarily care. In other words, we can find really simple expressions of it, day-to-day expressions, how you are at the grocery store. You can find all kinds of little practices that become conscious expressions of this quality that you want more of in your life. And then by your way of being, opportunities will naturally appear that are in alignment with that.
Yes, I believe so too. And being versus doing, that's also a feminine quality. And I've been speaking about this more and more, that things will happen through your being. It's just a very new concept. It's not very easy.
Well, we have
to
get it out of
explain.
concept.
Huh?
We have to get it out of the concept. All right, it starts as a concept, right? Which is fine. It's a concept right now. Now we have to get it into practice.
Right.
And practice is really simple. Let me offer you a few little ideas. For example, my wife sometimes says I'm cheap. I don't like this. And my kids started saying it, and I started to go, wow, am I really showing up as cheap? My joke was I called it fiscally responsible, which was just a joke. But I was like, yeah, sometimes I do get into scarcity mentality. I can see where that happens. And as you know, with law of attraction and all this, we don't want to do that. We don't want to start creating a tug of war, mine versus yours. Not helpful. So I started a practice. In America, the bills are called Federal Reserve notes. That's what they're called. I started calling them thank you notes. And every time that I would exchange them, I would say thank you. So if I was at the market, I would hand the money or a card, it didn't matter, and I would look the person in the eye and I would say thank you. Thank you for the good, the service that you're giving to me. Thank you for what what you're offering to me. And it started to create this incredible experience of connection, of exchange, because that's what currency is. It's an exchange, right? I mean, not the way it's set up now, but the basis of it is that we're exchanging good and service. We're exchanging. And I wanted to bring that back in my life. And it was a powerful choice to create this practice. It's simple, no?
Yeah.
I'll give you one more just so you have ideas. In January, I started Ho'oponopono. You've heard of this, right? The Hawaiian spiritual practice, Ho'oponopono?
No.
Doesn't matter. It's 4 sentences.
Okay.
I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Yes.
Thank you.
I've heard it. I just didn't know it was called that.
It's a Hawaiian spiritual practice. Well, lots of people do it, but yes, there's a Hawaiian Japanese doctor that's promoting. Right. Lots of people do it. Okay. So what I recognized is even though I've done all this consciousness work in the world, I'm still constantly judging people. And that's not in alignment with who I'm committed to being, because I am a kind, loving, open-hearted man. That's the commitment. Now, I don't always act like that. That's my aspiration, right? That's who I'm committed to being in the world. And judging people constantly, like out at the market, I'm judging people. It's not working for me. So what I started doing in January, and it's been unbelievable, is every time I catch myself judging someone, just in my head, I don't say this out loud, I just say, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And it has shifted the energy profoundly. I swear to you, I'm like walking on water sometimes. Not all the time, because I still get in my little, craziness. But mostly, the minute I catch myself, all of a sudden people are smiling around me. And I live in Los Angeles. People don't run around smiling in Los Angeles. I mean, it's heavy. It's like, it's intense. There's a lot of people. It's crazy. I'm having these incredible experiences of exchange because I'm shifting the energy internally.
Yes. That how magical that I actually heard that now, because I just read about it and they said they had tried this in prisons. And like the prisoners had changed totally. Wow.
Yeah.
Just 4 sentences.
Practices, well, and the practice. So there's an intention. So let's start again with the upper road. I am a, kind, loving, open-hearted man. That's what I'm committed to being, in service to what matters to me, my vision of what I want to create and what I want to give and what I want to do in the world. The behavior or the pattern is to judge. It's self-protection. In order to be in line with who I'm committed to being, I have to have a practice. I have to have something I do so I can shift the energy. Do I slip into this? Every single day. Right. Doesn't matter. What's the practice? And the practice has got to be something really simple. Yeah. And listen, whatever we think spiritual awakening is, we can simplify that too. We don't have to make it. My friend Jeff Brown, you may or may not know who he is. By the way, he'd be a great person to interview. He talks about enrealment. He's not interested in enlightenment. He's interested in enrealment, which is about becoming more real. And this more real thing has been very important for me because the world as I see it, right, from that mindset where I'm organizing and ordering everything into my belief structure and so forth, the unconscious patterning, is real. In my experience of the world from that vantage point, things are very real. Racism, very real. When I shift to this other perspective I'm coming from, those things become less real, because what happens is if someone's of a different race or a different creed or whatever, the connection is more real, right? So, and we have prejudices. And then the minute we meet someone and we start talking to them and we forget that they're from a different religion, or you forget that they're something different about them, that's more real. It doesn't mean that the other stuff isn't real. It is real. It's just more real. So enrealment is about becoming more real and more real and more real. And so instead of trying to get over or fix or enlighten, we move into relationship with our lives. I mean, real spirituality, from my perspective, happens in the mud. It's a murky deal. It's real,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So tell me a little bit about your show. Like, I'm curious from, doing my web show, how how do you decide who to have on your show? Like, yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in your heads, Barnett and Freeman?
Well, so right now the show's on a little bit of a hiatus. Barnett is doing a film in Canada called Milton's Secret, which is based on a book by Eckhart Tolle. It's a children's book actually that he wrote, and Donald Sutherland is playing the main. It's a grandfather character. It's about a boy who's being bullied, and it's a great story. It's a beautiful story, and they're filming that right now. So Barnett's off for 6 months. Sandy, his wife, and I were doing it for a little while, but it's hard to sustain that, just the two of us, because frankly, Barnett books the guests. Barnett has been around the sort of consciousness conversation for decades now, and knows a lot of people in the industry. I do too, but I mean. So really, it's what we wanted it to be was a conversation with friends, not an interview show necessarily, but a place where we could have, we called it a kitchen table conversation about consciousness. And so that's what it was intended to be 5 years ago when we started. And for the last 5 years, that's what we've done.
So where can people find it? I mean, it's in the US, so I assume I can't listen to it.
I think YouTube is the best way to go. I mean, what happened is interesting. So look, the radio world is changing. We're on a 5,000 watt station, which is 1.5 million homes here in Southern California.
Wow.
But it's not a wow, because what happens is it sounds very impressive,
Yeah.
but once you do the broadcast and it's over, it's over. There's no one can share it. It doesn't live on. And frankly, the audience comes and goes. They tune in because they're in their car or whatever. It's not a great medium. It is the medium from 40 years ago, but today's medium is podcast. Today's medium, frankly, is YouTube. So we don't really care about the broadcast. We never promote it. It's fine that we're on a station because we can sell, get a promoter and they can sell the ads and whatever, and people still want that, I guess. For us, it's not about that. It's about, there's a library now of 300 shows with Byron Katie. You mentioned her maybe before we started, and Daryl Anka, who's the Bashar is the channel. He channels Bashar and all kinds of amazing friends. Tons of best-selling authors and just amazing people, and some people you don't really know who are great. Who it's kind of great to find a person and they're like, wow, Thomas Hubel. I think that guy's amazing. I don't know if you know who he is. He's German. That guy is amazing. I mean, there's so many people who I got to get to know and discover, and a lot of these people became friends of mine, which is a tremendous gift. So, I don't know. That's what we do. So I say YouTube. It's Cutting Edge Conscious. That's the name of the channel, because consciousness was too long. And check out it. Dip into it. I mean, that's what I offer to people. Everything I do, from what I post on Facebook, what I do in the world, I invite people to meet me wherever they want. I'm not selling anything. I'm doing the things I do, and where people resonate, great, join me. A lot of the material I put out is free. Some you have to pay for, but that's life. If it's what you want, then you go for it. If Weight Release is what you want to do, then come do it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this for 2 years, and it finally happened. So
That's
excited.
awesome.
Yeah. Thanks
for taking
so much.
Time,
and all the best with your show and with feminine leadership.
Women in leadership. But yeah, feminine leadership. I like it. We also call it sometimes collaborative leadership. That's another way of titling it, just collaborative leadership. Instead of one person leading, it's leading by drawing people in and collaborating.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Well, thank
Jonica.
you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching, guys. And please, if you want to connect with me, you can do so on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I've become very active lately, and I'd love to connect with you there. And you can subscribe to my channel if you haven't before. Thank you so much for watching. Much light from Oslo and California. Bye-bye.